Alright, so in the last lecture that we did, we looked at media queries, and we learned basically how we could take a desktop interface and switch it from a desktop to a tablet down to a cell phone. We gained back a bunch of precious real estate that goes around the UI, and we get it back as we get down to a tablet, and when we get to a phone we go to a single column layout. Now this is all good and the navigation is all good, but we could do something a little bit better than this, a little bit more advanced than that. And we could accomplish it fairly easily with just adding a little bit of JavaScript to make things work. So we will do that, and we will just do the navigation and concentrate on that alone. So if you make a folder for what we're going to do today and drag it and drop it onto your VS Code interface, it'll load that folder and we can get started. So what we're going to do is make an index.html. Now before we start, if you go to my website, anthonymaximus.com, and you go to this post in the portfolio, this post would be on the third page, I believe. Intro to, no, it would be responsive mobile menus right here. So in responsive mobile menus, hamburger menus, what we're going to see is this page here where I go through everything we're going to go over today. There's a couple things in here that are not in here that I might go over, but the first thing we want to take a look at is what we're going to build and the process of what we're going to build. You want to be able to think in terms of planning, right? You want to plan out what you need to make, and you want to plan out the process of making it, and then once you get to the JavaScript part, plan out what exactly it is that you need to build and what how it's going to work, how it's going to function, right? So what we need essentially is we need a normal menu, and we need that menu when in this case anyway, when the screen shrinks down to a certain size, we need the normal menu to disappear, and we need the mobile hamburger menu to appear. And when you click on that mobile menu hamburger icon, we're going to need that icon to open up the mobile menu. Once the mobile menu is open, then the user can click on any link, and if they want to close the menu and not move on to a different navigation item, then they can do so with a button that we will place within the mobile menu that'll allow the user to close the button. So we build a normal menu as usual, we put the hamburger icon in there, and when the page loads, the hamburger menu will not be visible. So we're going to use display none to make it go away in the CSS. We're going to make a second menu that when the page loads, this side menu or sidebar is going to have a width of 0. So it's going to be fixed on the side of the page, and it's going to have a width of 0. Because it has a width of 0, it will be not visible. And when we open it and close it, what we'll really be doing is changing the width of that sidebar, right? By changing the width of it, we make it appear, and by changing it back to 0, we make it disappear, right? Then we're gonna need to put some element inside of that sidebar mobile menu that we can use to close it, right? And then we'll use media queries, or one media query, to show and hide the hamburger menu and the normal menu, depending on the screen size. Then we're going to need to make some JavaScript. So we're going to load the 3 elements that we're going to be manipulating into the JavaScript. The 3 elements is going to be the open button, the close button, and the menu, the mobile menu. And then we're going to have to make 2 functions. One function to open the mobile menu by changing the width of the menu, and another one to close the menu by changing it from whatever number we put to open it to back to 0 to close it. And then we're going to add 2 event listeners so that when the open button is clicked, it'll open it, and the other one will be the close button to activate those buttons. Okay, so this is essentially what we need to build. So what we can do is we can come down to our VS Code, and in the VS Code we can start writing things as we usually would. So doc.type HTML, HTML element, head element, and the body element. Inside of the head element, we will put the title, responsive, hamburger menus. And then we will put meta character set UTF-8. Whoops. Then we will put meta name, description, content will be just an example of a responsive hamburger menu. Then we will put meta name, and this will be viewport, and the content is as usual. Content is width equals device dash width, comma, initial dash scale equals 1. And this will make it so that our media queries work properly. And we will leave it like this for now. When we come back to move everything around and clean things up, we will link to our CSS file. But for now, we're going to put everything in the HTML. We're going to put the HTML, the style, and the JS in here at first. And then we'll move things to their respective places. So inside of the body, we're going to make a .nav. This will be the regular nav bar. Now, inside of the nav bar, what we usually typically would have is like the OL and then you know, the list items inside of here. What we're going to have this time is we're going to have an SVG above the OL. So let's go get an SVG. If you go to Google and say, can you make me an SVG hamburger menu, it'll give you this. And this is basically the hamburger menu drawn in HTML. So you can paste that in above the OL, and now you will see, if you open this in the web browser, you'll see the hamburger menu there. Now, when we get to the CSS, we'll play around with this because, like, you could fill the color, like that, for example, right? You can change the color in it here using the fill attribute, but and you could also alternatively do it on a single line, like each one of these is a line. You could use fill on one of these too, and it would do the same thing on that particular line. But you can also in the CSS change the fill of this if you target the SVG. Yeah, so that's there. The OL is there, and then we will put list items in there as we usually would, and an A tag inside of the list item. This will link to home like this, and then we'll put a couple dummy links: li enter, a enter, hashtag about, another li, another a, and then hashtag for the dummy link, and this will be contact. And that is good for the nav bar, the regular nav bar. So beside the regular nav bar, we'll put the side bar, the mobile nav. So this will be a div with the class of mobile-nav. And inside of the mobile nav, we will have the same exact, thing as the regular nav OL. The only difference would be that in here, we have to have a button to close the side nav, the mobile nav bar. So we can just use a list item with an A, and the A will have a href of hashtag again to make it a dummy link, but we'll put an X in there, and the X, when you click on this, it'll close the sidebar. Another thing we should do to both of these, to the SVG and the X button, is we'll give them both an ID. So the SVG will have an ID of open-btn, and this A tag here will have an ID of close-btn. So we're going to use these IDs to get these elements. We can use the class to get the mobile nav element, but for the open and close button, we'll use the IDs. Now, that's it for those. So we can do the style now. So the style, we'll start with the HTML. So the HTML, we're just going to change the font family to sans, and then on the body, we'll zero out the margin like we usually would, just so that there's no like outline on the body element. Now we can get straight to the nav bar. So, and again, we did not write this semantically, we just wrote it normally. So this is dot nav, and we will put the height as 80 px, and we'll put the background color like that for me. And then the .navol, we will simply zero out the margin and the padding. Margin 0, padding 0. Then .navolli, the list items, we'll put them as display inline block to make them go across the screen. Like this. Let's just let me just do this real quick. .navollia, and then we'll select the .navsvg. Now, .navsvg, we want to display none, just to get rid of it, like that. So, one thing I wanted to do is show you this, because just so you can keep in mind, display inline block on the list items makes it go across the screen how we want it to be. Alternatively, you could put display flex on here and it'll make the list items display as flex items. But if you do this, you have to tell the list items to list style type none, like that, to get rid of the numbers, and then you'd have to like move them away from each other or whatever. You know, you could use margin on them or whatever. This would have to go on the list items. So, you know, 20 or 25 px, 10 px, 0, 10 px, like this, which would give you that. Okay. So this is how you would do it if you use display flex. The display flex has to go on the OL, which would make the list items display like flex items. But alternatively, the way that we've been doing it is, instead of saying list style type on the LI, you would simply just say display inline block, and you could leave this margin here and it'll look pretty much the same. Okay, so this is the same thing basically. Now, what else? The A tags, we got to do font size 1.4 rem, color hashtag 000 or hashtag 222. Text decoration, none, to get rid of the underline. So that is all good for the navigation bar, the first navigation bar. So what I'll do is comment some code out here and say defaults structure and then that's the nav. Or this is the desktop nav. Could be more specific. So this is the desktop nav, and then we're gonna do the mobile. Now we can't, with this here, we can't really play around with it because it's not there. So we'll have to double back to this once we put the media query and make it show again once the screen is smaller. So with the mobile nav now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna style up how we want this to be when the page loads. When the page loads, we want this to be styled, but width is 0, right? So dot mobile dash nav. All we're gonna do is we're gonna do position fixed, top 0, left 0, height 100 viewport height, and then the width is going to be 0 viewport width. Now we could put a background color or background, just background, linear gradient. We'll do 45 degrees, comma, hashtag 222, comma, hashtag 000. But this will not get rid of it. It'll still be there. You'll still see the content of it there. And the reason why you can still see the content is because we have to make the overflow hidden like this, and then that will make it gone now. So now we have our normal looking website where we could add on to the main content and so on, which we will do after, and we will maybe add something more to this. So with that, we still have to do the mobile nav OL, margin 0, padding 0, and then dot mobile nav OLLI. Now these list items in here, they're going to be going down the page, which is fine. The only thing is, if I open up to just manually open up the mobile nav, 100. So you can see our background. If you look at these, is hard to see because of the dark background, but there's numbers there, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is there because these are list items, right? Right now it's display list item. If we wanted to get rid of the numbers, we would either have to tell it display block, like this, which will get rid of them. They'll be gone now. See, the numbers are gone now. Or we could say list style type and then change it to none, like this, and the numbers will remain gone once we reopen this. See, the numbers are still gone. So either or, display block or list style type none on here. We can also say font, text align center. This will center the text in the middle of its parent, like this. And then we could put some margin around these things, like 30px 0, 30px 0, like this. But before we take a look at it, let's just do the mobile nav OLLIA dot mobile nav OLLIA, the actual A tags. Color, white. Font size, 2 rem, or maybe even 2.2 rem. And we can get rid of the text decoration to none. So let's take a look at this now, and we should get this, which looks a lot better. So we could just leave it like that. That looks fine. So there's our mobile nav. So now what we need to do is we need to put the media query so that when this shrinks down to, like, 800 pixels or so, 700, whatever, that this OL disappears and the hamburger icon pops up. So we will say at media screen and our parameters. The parameter will be max dash width, like we'll do 800 px. So at 800 px and below, the, what was it, the dot nav OL will be display none. So now with this, we should see the nav bar OL disappear. And because the OL disappears, the list items within will also collectively disappear, and they do. Above, they appear, and below, they disappear. So we're already good for that. Now all we need to do is make the .nav svg pop back up. So up here, we'll say display block. And with this now, as this disappears, this will appear, and we should be good to go. All we need to do is fix the position of this, and we can do that with padding. On the nav SVG, we could put the same amount of padding that we have on the margin up here on the list items. So nav SVG will put padding, and we'll just copy this and paste it there. And then once we do that, it should look a little bit better. And it does, but maybe we change this to 20 pixels. There we go. And we're good. So that is all good now. So with that being all done, what we need to do now is we need to activate everything, right? So we need to run some JavaScript, and we do that in script tags, and we have 3 things we need to do, right? So we'll do 3 steps. Step 1, get all of our needed elements and pass them into variables. So we're going to collect all the things that we need, and if we do any more and we end up needing to collect more variables, we would just do that, add to it here, right? So as of now, what are the 3 elements that we need? We need the open button, the close button, and we need the sidebar, or the nav bar, right? So first we're going to do the open btn, and we're going to write this in camel case. If this was underscore case, then it would be open underscore btn like this. You could do either or, but a lot of times in JS you see people write it in camel case. A lot of times I use underscore case, but you know, it could go either way. So open button equals document.get element by ID, and in single quotes we're going to put the ID name of the element that in question that we need, or that we're trying to get, which is open dash btn, if I remember correctly. Yeah, open btn, open dash btn. So open dash btn in here. Now the method that we used is this is the method, right? So the method is saying get element by ID, and because we use get element by ID, it knows that this is going to be an ID, which is why we don't have to put a hashtag in here, because of the method, okay? When we use query selector, then you'd have to put the selector in there, whether it's a class or an ID. I'll show you that in a second. So the close btn will be equal document dot get element by ID, parentheses, single quotes. And mind you, double quotes works here too, but I do not use double quotes in JS. I use double quotes in HTML, single quotes in JS. That's just the way that I like it. So close dash btn for the close button. Now the third one, this is where we're going to use the query selector. So this is going to be mobile nav will equal document not query selector. And because this is going to be using query selector, we have to put the dot so that it knows what it is, that it's a class. Mobile dash nav. If this was an ID and we use query selector to get the ID instead of get element by ID, then you'd have to tell it that it's an ID by putting a hashtag in there. In query selector, you could use to get elements the same way that you would in CSS. So you could say .navolli, right? And this would gather the nav OL list item. In this case, it would be the first one. It'll just get that one, and that would be it. If you wanted to get all of them, you'd have to cycle through them and get them all by query selector all, and then you'd have to cycle through them all and get them all. But if you wanted to get the OL, for example, this would do that, and it would get the OL and everything inside of it, right? Like if we did this, just to test it out and show you, if we console log out that variable now, mobile nav, and we were to look at this, there it is right there, the OL that we got. And we got that by way of where it is, .navol, right? So that is how the query selector works. But anyway, we need to get the nav bar, so that would be .mobile dash nav. So these should be all loaded now into the variables. And again, we can test it by doing a console.log mobile nav. And there's the nav bar, right? If we did console.log open btn. Whoops. Typo. Mobile btn. There's the mobile button, right? And if we did close btn, the same thing would occur. It would show us the thing that is loaded into that variable. So we know everything is loaded up properly, and we can move on to number 2, which is make the functions to open and close the sidebar, or the mobile nav. I keep calling it sidebar, which it is, but more accurately, it's a mobile nav bar. And these, before we even do that, put this here, because these variables are constants, they're not going to be changing. So we put const there. If they were going to be changing, then we would put let there so that we could change it later. And then not having const or let there just makes it like a global sort of universal variable. But you should always use const or let in front of your variable. Now, the function open menu, all we're going to do now is get the mobile nav. So we're going to say mobile, M-O-B-I-L-E, make sure that's spelled correct. mobile nav dot style dot width equal, and then in single quotes we're going to put what we want the width to be. We want the width to be 100 viewport width. And then the next function close menu, we're going to take this and return it back to 0 viewport width, just like that. So now we can test this in the browser the same way that we were testing these before. If we refresh this and we type in open menu with the parentheses and push enter, we see the mobile menu open, and then we'll type in close menu with the brackets, and it closes. So we know that these functions work. There's only one thing that we forgot to do, which is we forgot to style the on the mobile menu, we forgot to put the transition property. So we'll put 0.3 seconds all ease, or we could do ease in and out, whatever. But now when we run those functions, it does it properly. Like it animates it. So yeah, if we just put it back to ease, the only thing that ease does is it just changes the timing function, right? So you could use ease or ease in and out, it doesn't really matter. So the functions work. Now all we gotta do is step 3, which is make the event listeners. So the event listener, we're going to put that on the open and close button. So the first one, open btn dot add event listener, and the event we're listening for is a click, comma, outside of the single quote, and then we'll just call that function when that click happens, which will be open menu. And then we're going to do the same thing for the opposite on the close button. Close btn dot add event listener click, and then we're going to close menu. There we go. So this should work, and when we refresh this and we get to the hamburger menu, we click it and that works, and that works. Now, one thing I also forgot to do is on the hamburger menu, note how my cursor does not change. We're going to want to target we already have it targeted up here, nav svg. On nav svg, we're going to say cursor pointer. That way, when we mouse over the hamburger menu, it changes to a hand that we know that we can click on that thing. Okay. So that all works, and that's all good. We could stop here. Well, actually, there's a couple more things that I want to show you, but we could stop there and call it a day, but let's go over a couple more things really quick. Thing number one, here in my lecture, I sort of added a little bit more to this, where there's an optional part here where there you could animate the HTML, or the main, I should say, or wrapper, whatever. You could animate the screen over, like the content over, with the opening and closing of the sidebar. So if you wanted to do that, this is what you would need to do to add it into this. So I mean, like up here, these are both the nav bars, right? So of course, underneath that you would have a .main, and then you're probably going to have like a footer too, right? You could put this as the wrapper and then have the main and the footer in that wrapper if you wanted to do that too. I mean, this nav bar by itself is just going to be there. I mean, you could have a header below the nav bar and then the main content and everything below that. You could do that, but let's just say you just had the main here, and then I'll put some H1 in here, and then I'll put some paragraph and lorem text in there so that there's some content. Okay. Now, if we open this again, everything, the mobile nav just sort of floats over it. Everything else stays put, which is fine. You could leave it like that. But if you wanted to make this move with it, what you would do is on the main, wherever we call the main, which we haven't done yet, underneath the mobile nav, we'll call the .main, and all we're going to do is put the same transition on it, the same transition that we put on the mobile nav. We're just going to put the same thing on the main so that it does it in unison, right? So now all we're going to do is in the JavaScript, we'll also tell the main to move with this by styling the margin, right? So we'll say document dot get elements. Well, we'll say query selector in this case. Query selector, because this is the dot main, and then we're gonna dot style dot margin left is gonna equal 100 viewport width, right? So this is just saying document query the selector, the dot main. We want to get this element, and we want to style it, and we want to, what style do we want to do? We want to margin left, and then we're gonna just sort of yeet it to the from the left to the right. So now when we click that, now we see how it has been pushed over. It's over there now, right? And because it's because it has the transition on it, when we move it, it does that. But typically no user is going to see that, right? So you click this, it moves it over. Now we're going to move it back with the bar, which we can do here. We can say document dot query selector dot main, and then we'll dot style dot margin left again, and this will be equal to 0 viewport width, just like this. Whoops, that parentheses got moved over too far. Should be like this. So document.query selector in the parentheses single quote dot main style dot margin left back to 0 viewport width when this is clicked on that function. Now we should get the opening and the closing. Okay, so that's one thing you could add to this. Another thing that you could do is, if you come back up here to the mobile nav, this is also configurable because we could make it appear differently. Instead of it starting from the left to the right, you could do height 0 viewport height, and you could do the width 100 viewport width, and it's already top 0 left 0. So instead, what you could do is on here you could be doing style height instead of width, and then you could change this from 100 viewport width to 100 viewport height. Of course, we would have to change this from margin left to margin top, because now we're going to be coming from the top down. Viewport width would have to be now viewport height, and so would it have to be viewport height here as well. And basically we just change this from going from the left to the right, to the top down. So this would do this instead. Still looks good, right? And because this is pushing the content down, whatever's below the main content will also get pushed down too. So once you put the footer there and whatever, like if I come up here and I add in a dot footer and some h4, what we would see is the footer is going to also get pushed down with it, right? So that is all good. Now, one more thing that I would like to show you. We're not going to go too in depth in this, but I just want to show you this so that you know that there's multiple ways of doing this. Now, what we did here is arguably the cleanest way, with keeping in mind recyclability, because these functions are reusable. We could recycle them if we needed to. For example, let's just say we wanted to have another button where we could use these functions on. Like maybe I want to have another button that I could use to open and close the mobile menu, right? For whatever reason, I don't know, right? Like maybe I want to also make it so that if you click anywhere on this bar, it opens the mobile menu. You could do that by loading the you could load the whole nav bar into a variable and do that if you wanted to, or you could just do it by getting it like how we did here, right? Which we're going to clean this up as well. So if you wanted to do that, just for the sake of saying, you could do that with these functions. You could reuse them as many times as you wanted to. But with that being said, this could also all of this here could also have been written a little bit differently, like this. Open BTN, add event listener, click, and once it's clicked on, we'll use a function like this, an arrow function. And in the arrow function, we would just put all of that in here. And then on the close button, we would add an event listener. And then we would put it on click again, and then arrow function. And the arrow function would have all of this in it, like this. So, watch, if I cut all of this out, this will still work. The menu will still work, right? Because these arrow functions are accomplishing the same task. Basically what is happening is you're saying on the open button, we're going to add an event listener, and in the event that it is clicked on, this arrow, just do all of this stuff in here, right? We don't need to give it a function name or anything, because this will only work, this function only works in this case on this thing. You see what I'm saying? And again, these things in here, this function, which means these things only work in this case on this thing. It's a throwaway function. It only works the one time. It's a one and done thing, which in this case is fine. Some people would do this. Sometimes I would do it this way, right? But the other way that I had it, like this is again reusable, because these functions have names and they can be called whenever on whatever we want to put them on. Okay, so if you want to use arrow functions, that is fine, right? But for this, you know, we could leave it like that. What I'll probably do is do another video specifically on, you know, functions and arrow functions. But for now, just know that you have those two options. Now, one more thing we're going to do is we're going to clean this up, these two particular lines here. So what it should be is const, and that is the main, right? So main content equals document dot query selector, and the selector we want to get is dot main. And now that that is loaded into that variable, instead of saying all of this stuff, we can just say main content, and we could do the same here like this, which now this looks a lot cleaner and a lot more easier on the eyes, and it all works. It's all good to go. So that is the basics of that. The last thing we should do is, like I said before, we were going to play around with this fill color. like that. See, we could change the fill color to whatever we need. So just keep that in mind. If you want to change the color of the SVG, it is done with fill, not color or background color. And there you have it. Very easy mobile menu done the proper way. So you can again see the lecture here on my site. That is anthonymaximus.com /webd-150-responsive-mobile-menus. So there you go. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Feel free to like the video, drop a comment, all that good stuff, and we'll see you in the next one.